Welcome to the PR Essentials Summit series, where the experts reveal how to do PR so that you can do it yourself. Hello, and welcome to Establishing, Driving Thought Leadership, and Building Your Brand. Thank you for joining us for this session of the PR Essentials Summit. Have you ever wondered how experts get their status, or do you consider yourself an expert and feel like you should be placed somewhere? If you've trained in something or established any kind of career longevity, there's no reason why you shouldn't be an expert in your field. It's all about being visible, saying interesting things, and getting exposure and awareness for you and your brand. There are stepping stones to every part of the PR process. And today I'll speak with our friend, Omar Hamdi, director of Pathos Communications, in addition to being a TV host, producer, writer, and media advisor. For more than a decade, he has worked with entrepreneurs and brands to establish recognition in the media, and I 100% vouch for him. Omar will walk us through on best practices in establishing and driving thought leadership as an expert and how it relates to building your overall brand. Welcome, Omar, and thank you so much for joining us at the PR Essentials Summit.
Hi, Ranjini. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be speaking with you.
Great. So we're going to uncover some secrets today, hopefully, and have these people walking away with lots of information.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. So establishing credibility and thought leadership has become vital to the lifeblood of many organizations these days. Storytelling, authenticity, all that stuff has really kind of become critical to building the story and getting media attention, how you select partners, collaborators, deals that go through in business today. And I think I pretty much check out the profiles of anyone I work with. I think you'll agree that we all do that. We do a little bit of cyber stalking to everyone. And I'm always hoping that whatever startups we work with have a C-suite that is visible, says something important, and maybe is willing to kind of go out on a limb a little bit to promote their brand. And I know that's what you do for many, many businesses. So I would love for you to talk today about addressing the importance of credibility and thought leadership in today's business. And I hate to use the kind of thing that we're talking about now, which is like COVID, post-COVID era, but especially in the post-COVID era, can you kind of talk about how important it is to build yourself as a thought leader for not just yourself, but also the brand?
Well, absolutely. I think more and more, there is just no difference between a personal brand and a corporate brand. And that's the case for tiny little startups that are really nothing more than a business plan. But that's also the case for the biggest corporates in the world. We want to know who these people are. Mm-hmm. It's not enough to just know about the iPhone that's in our hand. We want to know about Steve Jobs, and we want to know about the new guy too, who hasn't done as good a job as Steve Jobs telling us about himself. So that's why I'm calling him the new guy. And I think certainly if you're trying to change things. So here's the other thing. I want to play devil's advocate as well. Uh-huh. Not every business owner in the world needs to wake up in the morning and say, I want to write an op-ed for the New York Times, right? Mm-hmm. If you're running a business that doesn't have anything to say and doesn't want to change the world and doesn't want to shake things up and doesn't want to raise awareness, if you're running a dry cleaners and you're on a street with 3 other dry cleaners and you all basically feel the same about the state of dry cleaning, some things get dirty and need to be dry cleaned, there probably isn't a need for you to go on CNN, talking about the breaking news.
Right.
However, for a lot of businesses, the businesses are more ideological than perhaps they realize. Mm-hmm. Certainly a lot of the more tech-driven, cutting-edge businesses that you might work with, for example, mm-hmm. A lot of these business plans have a real ideology to them. There's a version of reality that they're trying to create, and they're saying that this business plan, this business can be part of humanity's journey from where it is to where we want it to be. And if you've got that ideology and you've got that vision, you really need to be brave and bold and be talking about it. And probably a lot of people underestimate how important that is, but also how doable that is. A lot of people might think that, okay, well, unless you're a politician or unless you're Elon Musk, no newspaper editor is going to be interested in your views. But actually, probably a lot of them are. And I have to say, the entrepreneurs that we work with are intellectually some of the most interesting people we work with.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that accessibility seems like it's far-fetched. I know even when I'm writing stuff for different publications, I know like my parents are like, how did you put that advertisement in the paper? Like they're still confused. Like, how does that happen? How does someone like me or their daughter like become a thought leader? And I think that's something.
But why not you? But why not you? Because you
yeah,
are.
Exactly.
But why not you? You know.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. A lot of these founders, you kind of have to live the life that you imagine that you already have, right? It's like putting yourself in that position. Nobody knows you're not a thought leader, and maybe you are a thought leader and you're just not voicing your opinion. And I think that's what's important about this conversation is that all these founders that we're talking to today, and the founders that I talk to all the time, they should know that, you know, their opinion definitely matters, and it could be very interesting for many people to read about.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of businesses can sometimes underestimate how much advocacy there needs to be. So a lot of the time, I'll give you an example. One of our clients is a VC fund, and it's a VC fund focused on Southern African female-owned businesses. And it's a very successful VC fund. And there are some really, really amazing businesses in that part of the world run by women, and they get investment and they grow and it's great. But to get a VC sat in California or London to turn away all of the entrepreneurs that are right in his or her face and to say, there's a female-owned startup in South Africa that I'm going to put the money in, and to convince his or her colleagues of that, actually, there's a lot of advocacy that needs to be done to maximize that, you know? So there'll be some people who are the early adopters.
Hold on a second. You might have to.
And you don't need to do much preaching to them.
Hold on.
You might have to repeat. Then that can grow your market.
You might have to repeat that a little bit because we kind of got you cut out a little bit.
Sure.
But you were talking where I kind of lost you a little bit was where you were talking about convincing a VC firm, maybe in the States, to invest in something, and what kind of advocacy you'd have to do to get that kind of awareness.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there will always be some of a market there for you. And those are the early adopters, right? But with the right advocacy campaign, and if you almost view a startup almost like a political campaign, right? And we've got a 12-month political campaign, and we need to grow our market, grow our voters, you know, treat clients like voters. And you're trying to increase voter turnout and to increase the votes that you get. And that could really add a huge amount of value to a business.
That's actually a really good point. Positioning yourself like a political campaign is a great way to see how you can build awareness, because they have to do it, right? And I think everyone really does have to do it. They just don't realize it to get successful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's probably more doable than a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
I think certainly if you can position yourself and your business and your vision as being part of the news cycle, then that makes you very, very relevant. I think the number one mistake that I see people doing is they can be very inward looking. So for example, I get a lot of potential clients coming to us saying, okay, we just had a successful funding round and we want the media to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And okay, you know, there are parts of the media that will talk about that. And you're the expert on this stuff. I think, a lot of the time I tell them, call Ranjini. She knows exactly how to make everyone, talk about, your funding round and to get that buzz going. But what's 100 times more interesting than your funding round is the ideas that are in your heads that convince those people to give you their money.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes, that's such a great point. Okay. So you're an entrepreneur, you're ready to kind of put yourself on the chopping block. What are a few ways that founders and entrepreneurs can start to begin to build their profile? Like, what should they start thinking about doing when they want to dive into this thought leadership role or expert positioning? How should they get started? Like, what are the kind of basic building blocks of what they need to do?
Okay, so I would say there's a muscle in each of our brains, and that's the muscle that we use when we're watching the news and we're shouting at the TV.
Yeah.
Okay, right? So we need to start developing that muscle and using it in a way that's commercially valuable, because shouting at the TV is not commercially valuable, right? So
well, I don't know. I'm sure Siri or Alexa or somebody is.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure someone's cashing in on that. But that muscle in our brain that makes us react to events and articulate our view, I think start training that muscle. A lot of us are training that muscle every day. If we're speaking about this on social media, I think particularly Twitter is a medium where people react to events and make arguments and make a case for something.
Sure.
But then trying to move beyond that. So I think, for example, Medium is a great place. LinkedIn is also a great place. There are lots of people writing things as LinkedIn posts, mm-hmm. where actually I'm reading it thinking, if I was running an op-ed section, I'd be DMing that person saying, can we use that? So I think that's the first stage, is just to get that muscle trained and to start using it, and to see that as a core activity for a founder. That part of my core activity is once or twice a week to talk about what's happening in the world and how I see it and how I see my business or my industry as part of that. I think that's the first step. Once that muscle has been trained up, then I think start talking to editors, start speaking to publications. If you want to sort of do it yourself, I think it's probably more doable to start at, say, the local level, your local paper. If there are sort of industry-specific websites, industry-specific news sources, and to just work your way up. And at some point, maybe it's worth getting an expert in who can sort of turbocharge this, because this is labor-intensive stuff, and it can be hard to judge. If you and I were to speak for an hour, and I was spending half an hour speaking, you were spending half an hour speaking, there would be some things in what each of us said that would be really interesting to the media. Mm-hmm. But sometimes with our own thoughts, we're too close to them. So sometimes you need an outsider to say, well, that was all great, but those 3 sentences that you said in the last 30 minutes, I really like those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are good starting blocks. I love that. Do you think, so if you're, speaking is something that we do quite often with programs, especially with founders. And then I think thought leadership and speaking are kind of in the same, they are in the same category. Do you think, and do you think it's a good idea to have a personal website that kind of talks about some of your opinions? Or do you think that's necessary, unnecessary? Like, what kind of resume are we building when we're talking about thought leadership? Obviously, it's not a resume like you're applying for a job. I know oftentimes we recommend that people have links to things that they've done. So like, what should they be looking at if they don't quite have those links yet, but they are trying to build some kind of profile or a place where people can see what they can talk about.
I think a personal website is great, but I think also using social media as your personal website can be great. I think LinkedIn in particular is sort of the personal brand shop front for a lot of people, and using everything you can. So whether it's a personal website, for some people they may be notable enough to have a Wikipedia page. If you're not notable enough, then that can happen quite quickly once you start being more active in the media. But certainly, I think it's telling your personal story as much as you are telling the story of your business, and realizing that those two stories are parts of the same story. And I think that's something that investors are looking for more and more and more. Is your story as interesting as the corporate story? Because no one wants an about us tab on a corporate website that says we are managers and we're quite effective managers, and don't worry about us, we're running things very efficiently.
Absolutely. What about the medium of those channels, right? We do a lot of, I do a lot of writing, but I try to also shake it up by doing podcasts, and obviously here we're doing a virtual summit. So a lot of this stuff is webinar kind of focused, or, visual focused, but what is a kind of good mix of a formatting? Does it matter? What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. And I would say whichever medium works best for you.
Okay.
So speaking for myself, when I'm communicating with people, my preferred medium is a voice note over WhatsApp. That's, if I could only use voice notes over WhatsApp till the day I die, I would be so happy. And that works better for me. So maybe a podcast would be great for me. Other people are maybe much more visual. And, they need to be sort of using their hands, and, maybe they're more comfortable communicating with some graphics or, some imagery. Whereas other people are more comfortable with the written word, and their idea of communicating is, late at night, typing out their thoughts on a blank screen. That's the only way they can really sort of get in there and get their thoughts out. So I would say whatever works best for you. And if you don't know what works best for you, try everything and see what felt the best. What was most natural? What was least painful? What was
yeah, maybe that's a better way of putting it. What was the least
This is my cynical Britishness coming out now. It's about what's least painful. That's how we express positivity.
Awesome. No, that's really great. I think I like that. What's least painful too, because I think, I do talk about thought leadership with startups and companies, and that's the first place we go is with the written word, right? So I think there is a little bit of freedom in the formatting of that. And I like the idea of really presenting yourself in social media too, because that could just be a medium as well. So I feel like that's a great way of thinking about it. You don't have to talk in long article formats. You can speak in short formats too. And that's always great. And the great thing about today and today's digital media is that there is a format for everybody. Like if they wanted to TikTok, which I don't know if TikTok is really business oriented, but if they wanted to TikTok, they could.
Yeah.
Actually, I saw this awesome TikTok on LinkedIn. She's like an HR person, and it was just it was kind of entertaining. And she was just dancing and talking about employment and applying for jobs. And she just did a really great job. And I'm guessing her kids maybe helped her with it, but it was so entertaining. And I watched it 3 times. It was just 1 minute, but I was just she did such a good job, and getting her point across about how to apply for jobs, and that you should be applying for jobs in December, because it's a slow month for some people. So it was just the way she communicated that was really marvelous, actually.
Absolutely. And there's a medium for everyone. There's a medium for everyone. So there's sort of no excuse not to try it.
Yes.
And it really does. Here's what it really comes down to is this, if you do it right, this will put money in your pocket. This will put dollars in your bank account. People will be much more likely to do business with you if you're seen as a rock star.
Well, so that brings up another question that I did not have, but how are you measuring this? How are you measuring the success? How do you measure the success of thought leadership?
So this is the least quantitative thing you could do, right? Because it's on a medium that you don't control. So if you've got an op-ed on a news website, they will never tell you how much traffic they get or how many people read your piece. Right. You can get a sense. You can get a sense if something has gone super viral by looking at the URL on Twitter and things like that. But that can only just give you a general temperature of how it's doing. So if you're the kind of person who needs that sort of really quantitative measure of, exactly this many people saw this and this many eyeballs and this many clicks, then maybe there will be other media that will work better for you. But the real test for me is if you're trying to nurture a client and you send them something you've written and they go, wow. Yeah. And then they become a client. So that's not super measurable, but you can see the effect of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think to your point also, I mean, obviously some of these questions, I know some of the answers. I'm not gonna lie. So yeah, I think a lot of these thought leadership pieces are validation for, your expertise. And so it definitely can help in the new business process when someone's asking you a question and they're really feeling uncertain, and then you've written something in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times.
And that could be part of your answer. Well, I was talking about just this issue last week.
The other day, yeah, exactly.
Do you subscribe to Time magazine? Because I was just saying this. And there's a reason why the most powerful people in the world do this. There's a reason why ministers of governments, heads of state, ambassadors, billionaires, politicians, there's a reason why they are all fighting over these column images. Right. Because it helps their power.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the other thing, right? You can't measure it necessarily quantitatively directly sometimes, but it's, hey, you're positioning yourself against the millions of people who are trying to position themselves but aren't doing it, doing thought leadership. And I think that's another good point. I have a client who's a doctor, and he's always like, oh, Sanjay Gupta he's always being quoted in this, or, this other doctor, Kevin MD is being quoted. I'm like, well, he's saying something, you're not. Yeah. So,
and here's the other thing is, how many years did those names spend, and how much money and time did they invest to get to that stage where they are, national brands in their own right? It's a tough journey. Like, I would never hate on anyone for getting to that stage, because I know how hard someone has worked. If they haven't, then someone like me has worked damn hard to get them there, and they've invested a lot of money in that. And this is actually one of the drivers that I get a lot is, who's this guy? And usually it's like a competitor. Who's this? He's always on the TV. Who is this guy? That should be me. And it should be you and that guy. There's room for everyone.
That's total point. It's it doesn't happen overnight. These people have been doing it for a long time. So when you're thinking about doing thought leadership, think of the long haul. I think also try. I like the trying different formats. That's an awesome recommendation, because then people can see that you're versatile or that you're willing to do. I mean, a part of, I think, inspiration comes out of other people's willingness to try things, because then it inspires other people to try. So especially in the startup world, you want to be inspired. And I think that's part of it as well. And I love thought leadership. And I think also it's taken its own place in media over the last couple of years, especially this past year, of course, with COVID. So I think more people are thinking of it as a top of mind thing versus what we would typically talk about as PR or traditional media. So it's, I feel like it's rising in importance right now.
That's an interesting observation. I've never thought of it like that, but I think you're right, because normally we would get let's say we're a room full of founders and we all want to sort of show everyone how great we are and do lots of business. We'd normally get that social status from, what we're wearing or how we're coming across or who we're having a power lunch with. And, a lot of the time this year, we haven't had that. So it's almost like our media footprint. The media footprint is the new Rolex. It's the new status tool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. Okay, so I have this loaded question here. Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, several other major outlets are leveraging their SEO capabilities and their kind of their status for paid thought leadership programs. And I'm just wondering, what do you think about that? Things like the Forbes Business Council or Entrepreneurs New Council. I strongly believe editorial is obviously like a very valid and credible thing, but I think all of these platforms are credible to some degree. I mean, they're not going to put you on there if you're just somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. They still have an editorial board, but like, what do you think about these paid programs versus something that's like an earned media opportunity?
Mm-hmm. I think they're all great. I think they're a lot more affordable than they used to be. So not so long ago, if you wanted to do a sponsored content with a big media brand, the spending would start at $50K or something, and that would be for a really basic package. And I think what these brands have realized now is that because everyone is becoming more and more media savvy and media aware, and everyone wants to be credible, they've created an affordable version of that product. So a lot of these brands are very affordable. We're talking about a couple of $1,000s can get you that stamp of approval. So we're not talking about huge amounts of money at all. So I'm sort of saying, why not at that price? Yeah. And this is what they've gone for. They've gone for why the heck not pricing. That's the price point that they're aiming for. And I think they've succeeded. What's the value of it? It is valuable. I think a lot of people are quite cynical, and even outside the PR world that you and I live in, I think a lot of people will pick up on the difference between paid content and unpaid, bona fide editorial content. But even then, I think it's worth it. And maybe it's probably a good stepping stone, I would say, because it's reliable. You pay that money and you get that exposure and you get a taste of it. And if you suddenly feel that you're 10 times more confident going into a pitch meeting because you've got a few media badges on your pitch deck and you can say as featured in, and you feel like that's giving you huge value, then maybe continue down that path and say, okay, how do I get into the editorial and how do I become someone who's recognized just because of what I'm saying and not because of the money I'm paying. So I think as a first step, absolutely. I think all of those programs are awesome.
That's a good overview. I like that. Actually, that just brought up a question. I'm going to make this my last question so we can wrap up. But I guess, just because I like to give everyone some actionable things from all these sessions that we're talking about today. What are some kind of key things to keep in mind? Let's say if I'm writing an article and I really want to position myself as a thought leader, I don't want to be annoying or, people have a tendency to kind of promote their companies. What is the maybe a few best practices when you're writing a piece, maybe for not the first time, but in the beginning, to really create something worth value that people will, look at and appreciate?
Sure. So in no particular order, I would say don't sell. I think one of the tragedies of my life is that people think marketing and media are the same thing. So don't sell, and realize that actually your thoughts and your ideas are the best advert for your business. They really are. The thoughts and the ideas that drove you to do one of the hardest things in the world, to start a business or to join the C-suite. That those thoughts and those ideas are the most interesting advert. So that's number one, don't sell. Number two, try to be of the moment. So a lot of people have really great ideas in the abstract, but they struggle to connect them to what's happened, ideally today. If not today, then this week or this month, right? And I think that can make it a lot more interesting to a broader audience, rather than you always preaching to the choir, and you've just got, the people who were already interested in that subject are now reading your article about that subject. If you can explain, and I can give you an example. One of our clients is a supply chain business, a supply chain consultant. Now, supply chains are not the sexiest subjects in the world. There aren't loads of kids saying, mommy, daddy, I want to be a supply chain person when I grow up. Forget being an astronaut. I want supply chain. Yeah. So it's not sexy stuff. But if you link that to how soon are you going to get a vaccine, suddenly everyone cares about supply chains, right? Yeah. And that's a real life example of a piece we worked on for a client and got published. And we wouldn't have got it published if we weren't connecting the dots. So Number one, don't advertise. Number two, connect the dots to what's happened today, or if not today, this week. And number three, I think, is to not censor yourself. Don't censor yourself. I think something I learned a long time ago is to write unthinkingly and then edit ruthlessly. And I think a lot of people try to do both of those stages at the same time. And there's a big cultural thing here as well. I've noticed that clients, so about a third of our clients are in the US, about a third are in the UK, and a third are in sort of the rest of the world. I would say, just comparing the US and the UK, just a huge difference is that Brits are taught to doubt themselves at a very, very early age. And it's almost like they're heckling themselves as they think of ideas. Whereas Americans, I think, are much more expressive and vivacious people.
Overly confident, maybe?
Well, and confidence is awesome. We love confidence. So I would say, don't sit there asking yourself, can I say that? Is that going to upset anyone? Is that controversial? Get it out there, and then have a cup of coffee, go for a walk, and then do that little check. But don't do that at the start, because then you get that sort of writer's block of, I don't know what to say. I don't have anything to say. So don't advertise, and don't edit yourself. Don't be harsh on yourself, and be of the moment.
I love it. Those are great pieces of advice. Thank you so much. I feel like this was so useful. For me, at least it was useful. I'm hoping everybody's watching. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you or make sure that they're being in the moment?
So I am actually, I do not follow my own advice, and I'm not on any social media, and I don't write anything, and I don't express opinions anywhere, because we've got such a mix of clients that sometimes we're on both sides of the same debate, right? So I'm a blank canvas for my clients' paintbrushes. So I don't do anything that I've just told you to do, so I'm a huge hypocrite. But our website is pathoscommunications.co.uk. That's PATHOS, pathoscommunications.co.uk. And people can contact me through there.
Just to preface, he might not take any of his advice, but he's amazing. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
But he's amazing. It works. I promise it works. Thank you again so much. I'm hoping everyone has gotten some useful advice out of this. If you guys have questions, contact Omar, contact me, and we will try to help.